Good evening. Hello, I'm back. I had my wisdom teeth out. Now they're gone. How nice is it to be back? Hello. Okay, I've got my little list here. I ran out of post-it notes, but I've got a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. So yes, it's all happening tonight. Okay. All right, The Guardian. Anti-Semitic cartoons. Well, they just never really go out of fashion, do they? Particularly where the Guardian's concerned. So there's a bit of an uproar at the moment because there was a picture of outgoing BBC chairman Mr. Sharp. I don't know anything about this guy. I couldn't care less. But apparently he's Jewish. And that meant that the Guardian, the left-wing newspaper in the UK, decided to portray this Jewish man in, let's put it mildly, anti-Semitic ways. So, for example, the picture, if you haven't seen it yet, is, I think, of Boris Johnson, I'm not sure, some fat dude on top of a mountain of shit. And right at the front corner, there's Mr. Sharp clutching, I think it's like a box. And in that box, there's, I don't know if there's money, but there's they're like octopi. What's the plural of octopus? Anyway, they're sort of sitting there, reminiscent of photos or pictures from Nazi Germany, where Jews were portrayed as having tentacles all across the globe. They'd have these sort of long hands that would just magically reach out and clutch the world into their disgusting, jealous, money-grubbing hands. So it was completely along those lines, let's put it that way. To top it off, the guy, Mr. Sharp, is holding onto a box, and on the front of the box, there's reference to, I think, Goldman Sachs, but you just see the word gold, because of course Jews love gold, right? This is sarcasm, by the way. And the worst bit was his face. So his face was caricatured with a big hook nose and this sort of grubby, flabby lips. And he's a little bit Middle Eastern because, you know, the Jews, they're still like they're not European. There's still something different about them. So he had very overly caricatured and gross physical features that would basically fit a freaking Nazi newspaper. And there's a couple of things here besides how obviously grotesque and unfair this is. But there's a couple of points that it raises about the left, I think, in general. The first point is there's such an unconscious bias. Don't you love that word? Don't you love that word? There's such an unconscious bias in this situation. And the unconscious bias is Jews are kind of annoying, but they're successful. So we can't really get rid of them, although we've been trying in the UK for, over 1,000 years. And they're so annoying and successful that even if they do face a bit of racism or anti-Semitism, it just doesn't really count, okay? Because if you're successful and happy and successful and rich, then it doesn't matter that people try and kill you because, you're rich. So it doesn't really count. That's the mentality of the left. There's this begrudging, very nascent and hypocritical attitude towards Jewish people. That's the first point, I think. The second point ties into that. The second point ties into that hierarchy that seems to exist in many progressives' minds, the triangle of power, as it were. And in their mind, Black people are at the bottom. And they have to be kind and generous and benevolent towards Black people in general. Even if some Black people are rich and successful and famous, it's still societally unfair towards Black people. They're at the bottom of the rung. And then you've got Muslims, and then you've got other groups who, get a bit more powerful as they go up the hierarchy. And Jews are somewhere at the top because, again, Jews are rich, apparently. Although that's, not a uniform truth. I know many people who happen to be Jewish and who are not particularly good with money. So again, stereotypes abound. Some of the readings that I've been doing recently are around the history of Jews in Europe. And what's so grotesquely unfair about this trope is that Jews, when they moved into the UK, for example, when they were being expunged from mainland Europe, they didn't want to work with money per se. They wanted to fit in and belong and have a home and be tradespeople or have their land and do their business, as most people do. But many people in power, Christian kings in particular, needed people to look after the money, and they needed a scapegoat and a face to raise taxes. This is a tactic that was used in, I think it was France as well, that the king would need money from the people, but there were certain restrictions around Christians using money. It was a bit tacky and a bit tasteless. So very often the kings and people with power would utilize Jewish subjects and get them to be the people who would raise the taxes and go around, getting all the money. So this stereotype that Jews are just infinitely connected to the coin, to the mullah, was literally enabled and created and enforced and taken advantage of by Christian royalty and Christians in power. They pushed Jewish people and citizens and smart people into those positions and situations and took advantage of them, so that the common folks started to hate who they saw as Jewish money grubbers. But in reality, the money was always going back to the king or to the royals. Very sinister, very utilitarian, and completely unfair. Anyway, that bullshit has been going on in particularly the UK for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. And the fact that The Guardian just blatantly, without much embarrassment, publishes a picture like that is just fucking disgusting, I'm sorry. Particularly considering this culture we're in at the moment where apparently everybody's a fucking Nazi. Didn't you know? Everybody's a Nazi. Everybody's a fascist. Except the actual Guardian, who literally publishes the most fascistic portrayal of Jews, the number one target of Nazis, in case you've forgotten that little detail. They are the most fascistic cartoon drawers I have seen in the last 5 years. So the hypocrisy, as I'm sure you know, as we all know, the hypocrisy is so effing tiresome. It's so pathetic. And again, the irony is, to me, it points out the idea, the fact that they don't actually care about fascism per se or Nazism per se. They don't actually care about who the real victims of that are, which is inevitably 99.99% is always the Jews, and then other groups who the Nazis didn't like. But the number one target are Jews. And the fact that they will publish something like that, despite all of their deep intentionality about racism and this and that and power and blah, 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 they'll publish something like that and not give a shit, because they don't give a shit about Jews. That's the end game. That's the real point. So when they cry about the right or anyone right of centre being a fascist or a Nazi, they don't actually mean it. They don't believe that. It's just a word that they like to throw around because it's such a horrible word. But it's a word that first-year uni students use and throw around. It's like the most basic, banal, gross, simple slur word you can throw around. It's not creative. And it's completely insincere because, as the left proves over and over and over again, hello, Labour Party, I'm looking at you, you don't actually give a shit about Jews. You just don't. Imagine if on that cartoon cover you had, God forbid, a person of colour or a black person with some grotesque reference to hanging or to the grotesque pictures from the Jim Crow era, the way that people of colour were portrayed or black people were portrayed. Or God forbid if it was a cartoon of a Muslim businessman being ousted from the BBC, and on the cartoon you have him strapped to a bomb, a suicide bomb. Imagine the outrage and the articles that would flow out from all the young, enlightened people saying, you know, how Islamophobic it was and how racist and how xenophobic and how full of unconscious bias it was. Imagine the outpour of outrage and benevolent righteousness that would flow out if it was any other category except Jewish. It's pathetic. Anyway, just ranting about that because it's just like, really? Like, you're still using those tropes? You are still using those sort of pictures of Jewish people? Fucking God's sake. And they didn't even seem that sorry either, actually, when it was pointed out to them. They just didn't give a fuck. Fuck you, Guardian. You are just, horrible. Moving right along to a man who wants to get a uterus. Isn't it great? Sorry. Okay, so this is a clip of, there's an interview with a man called Jessica Alves, who presents as a female and has had a lot of plastic surgery. And it was just a clip that I saw very briefly on the Story Box, which is a great channel. And basically we're at the stage now where men will think that they're women and dress up as women and are now wanting to get designer uteruses. Again, what's the plural of uteruses? Uteri? They want to get designer bits and pieces of women's anatomy, and they want to install them into their own bodies, into their male bodies. The problem is, at the moment at least, with this Frankenstein, creepy as fuck ideology, is that, okay, let's say that this guy, Jessica Alves, who's very famous, very popular on social media, looks like a blow-up Barbie doll, toy, figurine, cat person. Seems like a nice person, by the way. Like, I don't hate Jessica. I don't have any animosity towards him. But him wanting a uterus is so fucking absurd. Let's say that some dead woman's uterus is used, or some other woman benevolently gives up her uterus to the man god. And the man god, aka Jessica, takes it and they have an operation and install the uterus in his body. Where the fuck is the baby going to go? Let's say he just states a baby in the uterus that's been implanted in his male body. Where the fuck is he going to push the baby out of? He doesn't have a vagina. So you've got to connect that up. You've got to connect up the hormones. You've got to connect up other parts of the body to grow the human life form. It's so Frankensteinian. It's so fucking disgusting that we have taken the concept of woman, smashed her to pieces, and then sort of sifted and sorted through it like we're playing with a Lego set. I'll have that bit, and I'll have a bit of that, and I'll have a bit of a uterus, and then I'll just put it all together, and we'll click it all in place, and it'll be some sort of monstrous replica of what we want, because we are mimicking women now that we've destroyed them. And now we are mimicking them and their life-giving powers, and we are appropriating that. And we're degrading them. We don't need them. We just need their uteruses. And then we'll stick the uteruses in ourselves, and then we the men, will give birth to kids. This is something that a lot of feminist theory has argued was sort of the end fantasy goal of a lot of these sorts of guys. A lot of men obviously do not like this or go along with it. But Jesus Christ, it's one of the reasons I call this channel The New Frankensteins, because I feel like, you know, we killed God in the West a couple of 100 years ago, and now we've killed man and woman. Actually, we've killed woman. Man is still okay as a concept, but we've murdered woman and mummy, and so now it's a free-for-all. Now you have men appropriating motherhood and trying to become mothers themselves, which I think is like a deep-seated fantasy of a lot of guys. It's don't even get me started. So we are both the doctor from that story, you know, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. We are the doctor creating the monster, but we are also the monsters. So we are both God and monster. Okay, now we're heading into ancient Greek theory and ancient Greek mythology. We are the fucking minotaurs now. We're half human, half God knows what else. It's fucking sick. And women, meanwhile, are being denigrated, their rights are being taken away, their spaces are being invaded and up for grabs without any conversation. That's the thing that always gets to me, is this refusal to have decent, open, conversational debate about this topic. And I think the turning point has been triggered in places, and I think that there's a massive backlash that's starting now, actually, to this absolute fucking bullshit. And again, like I've said in one of the other videos, the irony is, after all of this noise and this insanity, I don't think that actual trans people's lives are going to be better. I don't think they're going to be safer. I don't think they're going to be happier. I don't think society as a whole is truly going to accept them in a way that's healthy and safe and calm. Anyway, talking about trans people again, because it's a hot topic. Dylan Mulvaney, sorry. Latest clip, he's broken his silence after making a couple of $1 million and ruining Bud Light. In his latest clip, I don't know if you've seen it, he basically wants to make misgendering people in an article. So a journalist calling a man, he wants to make that illegal if the person that the journalist is writing about identifies as a female. So Dylan Mulvaney was referred to in an article as he a couple of times, apparently by some journalist or some writer or some hack. And Dylan felt very offended by that. And he actually thought, and he says it with this creepy, calm, he's such a sweet, butter wouldn't melt in his mouth kind of guy, that he sort of feels like maybe it should be, I don't know, like illegal or something to like misgender people. So he says the most censorious, authoritarian, and creepy things with this sweetheart package of I'm just Dylan and I'm just such a nice girl and aren't butterflies wonderful? That's basically his tone of voice. And so anyone who's pretty fucking stupid, and there's many of those sorts of people, in the world today, particularly on TikTok and Twitter and everything, I'm probably included in that. But anyone who can't think beyond a pretty face, and Dylan is sort of pretty sometimes, I think, although he does have a very big mouth. But anyone who can't see beyond that will go, yeah, what's wrong with making it illegal? I mean, Dylan's so nice, and we all know that nice men never do anything bad behind the scenes to anyone, do they? That was sarcasm again. I'm thinking of all the serial killers who were the nicest neighbours and the nicest gentlemen, and people were always shocked, like, what? No, he's not a serial killer. I'm not saying Dylan Mulvaney's a serial killer. I'm saying what presents here, the facade and the face, is not necessarily what's really going on. And what's really going on with him is this really creepy inability to take criticism or feedback or to not be loved. I feel like he just wants love. And every time people go, yeah, no, I don't love you, the pain. So, yeah, I think that's absolutely outrageous. You should be able to misgender people, quote unquote. You should be able to dead name people. And you can quote me on that. It's called free speech. You should be allowed to do that without going to jail and having the freaking key thrown away and the door locked. Yeah, I absolutely think you should be allowed to do that. Personally, I wouldn't run around doing it all the time, although I probably have already. But yeah, there's just some things that you can't just go, oh, let's bring in the law. Let's just make everything illegal that we don't like. That is the most fascistic thing you can do. But again, part of the irony of today's many movements is they have no self-reflective capability. They don't look at their own behavior and go, am I the fascist? There's like a segment that goes around, that does the rounds, am I the asshole? And then you debate it. I think the segment should be, am I the fascist? And then think about it for a minute or two, because you might find that you are. Okay, last topic. I just wanted to point out, because it brings me great joy to do this, that Harry, that little twerp, I'm sorry, but he's just such a bloody narcissist. It's so funny to me that he spent time in his book Spare, his memoir, where he trashed his brother and was like, poor man, he's going bald. No, poor Willie, he's so ugly. Have you seen pictures of Harry lately? His muffy hair is receding. He's literally half bald. It's look, nothing against balding guys. It would be really sad to lose your hair. I can't imagine what that would feel like. I'm just pointing out that Harry was really happy to have a go at his brother and gloat over his brother's baldness when he himself is now a bald motherfucker. So sucked in, Harry, calm as a bitch, and you just get uglier and uglier by the day. I have to say, though, Meghan Markle, she's looking great. That plastic surgery, whatever's happening over here, long, sleeky hair, she looks fucking great. She must be really happy as a narcissistic sociopath. That's my own diagnosis, and no, I'm not qualified to do so. It's just an impression. But she must be really happy. She's making the money, she's got the babies, she's got the title. She'll probably divorce Harry at some point, get rid of him. He's such a fucking muppet. And, maybe she'll get back into acting. I don't know. She's living her best life. And I think she actually looks really good. Like, damn, she's 44 now or something. Like, she's looking good. I wish I was rich and I could have plastic surgery and hair extensions and Botox and stuff. Fucking great. It'd be awesome. But I'm not, so sell a fucking me. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful night and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.